record for largest deal closed with Fluint. He closed $30 million as a land contract. Just took a new job 2 weeks ago. And so everything that he knows, but for the opportunity to capture that, which is what we're going to talk about, would have walked out with
Jonathan Moss and Coach K, where you get the latest with AI and GTM today. GTM AI Podcast with Jonathan Moss and Coach K. Tune in now, don't delay. Catch the future on display.
Welcome to the GTM AI Podcast, where we show you how real operators are using AI across their business. This is not just theory or strategy, but the actual receipts and the impact. So we put people in the kitchen with one rule. They have to actually cook. So there are a million places that you can go already that says, hey, AI transformed my business. AI transformed my go-to-market. You see all these things on LinkedIn. They send out these workflows of automating everything. The challenge with that is that most of the time they don't work. So this is not a keynote. That's not what we're doing here. We're actually going to show you behind the scenes of what problem the folks are tackling, how to build, and how it actually worked. So today I've got amazing two chefs and they're co-founders of a company called Fluint. So I've got Nate and John. Nate and John, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you give the audience a little bit about yourself? So Nate, you go first. Tell us a little bit about yourself and Fluint.
Yeah, it's Nate. I am the second brain inside of Fluint. I'll say my co-founder who you're going to meet, John, is the first brain. So I'm in Denver, Colorado, and repeat founder at this point, and I got into building Fluint with John by trying to buy something for my own go-to-market team that I was leading as a repeat enterprise sales leader now. I'm also a repeat founder, so the old product brain started spinning, and one day I was like, to my wife, Erin, I was like, Erin, I think we got to go back and do this whole thing again. And she was like, are you sure? And I'm like, John says it's a good idea too. So here we are.
So you blamed it on John. Okay. I see how this relationship
I said, I got a swim buddy going into it second time. She was like, all right, that's fair.
It didn't hurt to lean on each other for a long time before Fluint came to exist. So our wives worked out together, et cetera. So there was a little bit of weight behind blaming John.
This is true.
That's good. That's good. And Nate, before we go, John, you also wrote a book. I saw you're being a little bit humble. So you have a book or two now, right? Tell us a little bit about what drove you to write that and what they're about.
Yeah, I wrote a couple books now. One, I love to write, but two, long form writing was my way of expanding kind of our point of view on go-to-market. And so one of the first kind of areas that we wedged into the stack, because go-to-market tech is noisy, was looking at all the conversations that a sales team isn't actually in the room for, where buying decisions are being made, especially at market, in a complex deal. And then the second book was all around how do you shrink your message and do short sound bites that stick with executives. And along the way, a lot of what we write to form the point of view and then get feedback from customers before we go build anything, you would be shocked at the amount of product that we've built that's come out of conversations over the writing. And we can give you some examples of that, but everything that I've been writing has been deeply embedded into the point of view around what we're building.
Love it. Love it. Okay. First brain up. John, tell us a little bit about you since you're apparently the brains behind the operation.
Yeah, Nate's very much the what we do, and I'm the how we do it. I'm trying to take Nate's crazy thoughts and put it together. So I'm our technical co-founder, and I just like to build, man. That's really what it is. Building systems, solving problems, really focusing in on the problems, and just improving people's quality of life in various different verticals inside of business. I've bounced around a lot over my career, and yeah, now we're in sales tech.
Love that. Love the fact that you're engineer through and through, like building stuff that causes impact. Love the connection to impact, which is great. And it sounds like that try to keep Nate straight. So Nate's going out here. He's got all these crazy ideas and stuff. You're like, well, let's figure this out.
Yeah. One of our big principles is step by step. So we have big ideas. It's like walking up a staircase. How can we deliver this one step at a time to get to that final point? But there's only so much you can keep Nate contained. Once he's on a center smell, he's going. He's sending it.
Yes and no. What I'll also say, John's being a little humble because the team knows that John always has his mad scientist project going on behind the scenes. And then every once in a while, like something that I threw out there as an offhanded remark, he'll just show up on a team meeting and demo it. And so I've realized over time is if I contain the crazy ideas too much, then John doesn't actually have the opportunity to show up and build the thing. And the number of things that have become real that started as that's probably is impossible, but it's wild.
That's awesome.
I like puzzles.
like puzzles. And we were just talking about before we jumped on just the shipping velocity and the capabilities that you got now. So I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, but excited to hear more. So as we kick this off, Nate, would love to hear in your own words, why does Fluent exist? You hinted at it in your intro, but tell us a little bit more about what problem that you saw, why you all went out and decided to tackle it with Fluent.
Yeah. So when you think about the most expensive problems, specifically in complex sales, so mid-market, enterprise, upper enterprise, you have all of this pipeline that you spent a crazy amount of time and money. You're usually going to spend anywhere from 5K on the low end to 50K to generate an opportunity. And across the board, most teams are doing 17 to 19% win rates. And if you look at the differences, that's not the full story, because there's a pocket of reps who are closing 50, 60% of their pipeline. And then there's everybody else who's just pulling along. And so as a leader, you're always trying to figure out, how do I, and this is like a classic line that you've heard from tech all the time, which is clone your top rep. But you always know what you can't clone is that gut feel, creative instinct, where some people, they just know what is never going to be written down and never going to be captured in a playbook. And that's what's so hard about making a new hire, trying to ramp them, get them to productivity, because you're carrying all that cost. And then on the flip side, like my worst fear, I can name our top rep in every scenario. It was Travis, then it was Rachel. Today, inside of Fluent, it's Cora. And like your worst fear is that they're going to walk off the job. And I'll give you an example. One of our customers, their top rep, who actually holds the record for largest deal closed with Fluent, he closed $30 million as a land contract, just took a new job 2 weeks ago. And so everything that he knows, but for the opportunity to capture that, which is what we're going to talk about, would have walked out the door with it. And so as a leader, you're always trying to figure out what are the creative, nuanced pieces of a very complex, heavy sales process that I've not captured anywhere and I'm going to lose, but is the difference between winning or just letting the very expensive pipeline that I've created just die quietly and fade into the background. So that was the problem space that we've been going deep on, tackling and kind of building up to for the last couple of years.
And it's such a problem because you're right. If you think about everyone sometimes bucket into the 20-60-20 or the 10-80-10, hey, how do I do that? And most people focus on how can I move the middle up incrementally. And that's been the old kind of way to do things. How do I get rid of my bottom 10-20? How do I move them incremental up? And I just leave my top performers alone. But ultimately, it's been this interesting thing that you've talked about, which is everyone's talked about, like, how do I clone that 10%? But a lot of people just say, it's talent, or it's just, like you said, gut feel and things like that. But no, there's mechanisms, there's productization of things, of what makes the deal close. What do they do specifically? Where's that institutional knowledge? And so what you're saying is, hey, this is the problem we went and solved, and this is a solution that we put together to be able to replicate this and give these insights and understanding to your average day rep or new rep or whatever, to be able to act and operate as close to a top performer or maybe a top performer as possible. Is that kind of right?
Correct. And to give you a concrete or practical example of this, let's say you have a rep who does 2 different POC readouts on a Friday, right? Meet with the buying team, meet with the executive team, show the results. Now, with one team, they get an email from procurement at 9:00 that night. Now, that's team A. Team B, they get an email from the procurement team to keep moving forward next Wednesday during business hours. Now, when that rep, if they're a top performer, is negotiating, talking commercials with procurement, they're going to approach A and B completely differently, because they're going to read into the first one is, this was so important, the executive couldn't wait and was like, you need to follow up on this tonight, Friday, 9 p.m. The next is, we'll get to it next week. Now, that is a very tacit or implicit signal. It's not, they're not coming out right and saying, you should not discount when we get into commercial negotiations because we need this so bad and urgently. They're picking that up and they're reading that, even though it's not an explicit signal within the data. And so that rep who reads that, they're going to hold on to ACV at the finish line versus somebody else is going to miss that signal. So the question is, how do you capture that with AI? And that's what you then want to begin to get out to in the moments that matter, the middle of the pack, to begin to move them up, so that their ACV begins to match what your top performers are doing.
Love that. So yeah, would love to. So let's dive into that. So how did you go about solving this problem? So walk us through what you and John got together. You said, I know this is a problem. I think we can solve it. So how did you go about tackling this problem, and then lead us to what you ended up building? And then obviously we'd love to kind of see that, but walk us through kind of how you approached the solution.
To start it with a week or two of very little sleep, diesel engines. Once we get a hold of an idea, especially together, we were doing it independently. We just keep going. We can't turn our brain off. But ultimately, it was a deep dive into the theories behind tacit knowledge versus explicit knowledge, looking at how other industries, especially the U.S. military, who has an extensive research pattern on tacit knowledge and how you get that gut feeling or institutional knowledge from experienced people into non-experienced people. And then processing that, where that took us is the difference between what AI really is at a high level. I think right now there's a lot of just various tooling or LLMs being the existence of all of AI globally, and it's not. LLMs are like a subcategory of AI, and which is a subcategory of machine learning. So it's like AI, machine learning, deep learning, and then LLM. So it's just a small little sliver of everything that we're doing. And what really allows us to dig into tacit knowledge and start to identify those signals of stuff that maybe a rep can't even say what they're doing. It's just an action that they do unconsciously in the background. They just do it because they know they should do it, but they can't get it out. We use ML models to basically take all of the signals and through structured learning, basically pointing it in directions, we can comprehend and start to pick up signals on actions that they're doing inside of what they're doing and build out a judgment layer over a period of time that can then be passed to an LLM, which is very good. LLMs are very good at human to human interaction and talking and deep thinking. So giving it a baseline of statistics and numbers that we can pass in to the LLM to be able to do what it's good at. So using the right tool for the right job.
So I remember a conversation that John and I had. He decided one day, I should say over a series of time, but like when John has conviction on we're going to do something and he's finished chewing it over, I'm like, oh, this is serious. So one day we were having tacos. I love shrimp tacos. And I remember him saying, okay, we're moving to an event-driven architecture. I was like, tell me more. What does that mean? And so as he began to talk about the difference, here was like the analogy that we started to settle on. Anytime you're giving an LLM context, it's like a snapshot. It's like a photo, and it can write something. Think of it like a caption, right? This is what's going on with this, call it 1 million tokens of context at that point in time. But what we started to do was begin to shift and capture data over time to look at how it changes. And that motion reveals the pattern that, again, the experienced rep has over time. They can match a scenario against it. And so think of it like a video. Like video file is gigabytes worth of data as opposed to a megabyte. And the whole meaning of a video comes from the motion in between those frames. You put a bunch of snapshots together, you get a video. And that's where you can actually see, okay, what happened before this? What is most likely, if I play you 30 seconds of a clip, you can begin to make some predictions about, okay, what's going to happen in the next 10 seconds far more accurately than if I just show you a photo of John and I hanging out. But if you saw a video of us planning product over shrimp tacos for weeks and weeks, you could be like, okay, these guys are planning some type of roadmap. They're up to something, right? So it was moving how we capture and store data into time series, event-driven, tagged and labeled based on what's actually going on versus just, hey, let's throw it all together in one tiny snapshot, which is generally the approach with an LLM that is not backed by any type of broader set of data.
Makes it so learning from history, pattern matching, predicting what's going to happen, and understanding not just from a single rep, right? From all the reps, and then pulling all that together so you can mix and match and understand where propensity is to succeed, where propensity is to move deals forward, or what are the key things that you need to do if a deal is stuck potentially that we've learned from other historical data that you may have and patterns that would help you push this still forward. So that's pretty great stuff. And John, by the way, what do you mean? It's not just an AI agent that you create. It's not just Gen AI. Isn't that just all AI together? That's what everyone thinks now, right? I mean, it's been around for a long time. It's been around for a very long time. And ML was like one of the cores before we heard of this Gen AI LLM thing, right?
Yeah, and Gen AI LLMs are just a form of ML. It's the one that it's most approachable. It's humanized. You can talk to it. It's trained in those manners, but it has the window of what it's good at and what it's not. So there's ML tooling there, structured learning, there's unstructured learning, which is a whole different beast. Yeah, it's the breadth of AI is much larger and has been around for a lot longer. All those science fiction movies we watched as kids, there was a little bit of truth to what was spurring the creative ideas of making them. An LLM, for example, the analogy we use internally a lot is if you've ever seen the movie 50 First Dates, there's 10-second Tom. Hi, I'm Tom. Hi, I'm Tom. That's what an LLM is good at. Hi, I'm Tom. What do you want to do from this point? You have a very short window of time to talk to me before you lose everything that's there. How we retain that information, how we drive analytics and look across the entire book of business, which for AI to be successful, large data sets are required. That's how we get it done.
Awesome. Love that. All right. Now you got me hungry on shrimp tacos. And since we did talk about this as a cooking show, so would love to see how you made those shrimp tacos into the product and what you all created, because this sounds almost like a special sauce that we should, a bunch of ingredients with some special sauce. You all are now in the kitchen at a Michelin restaurant cooking this up and no one knows how you're doing it. So I would love to see how you did it, what it looks like, and show the outcomes that it's driving.
Yeah. So, well, John, do you want to start on some of the technical visuals, or Jonathan, you want me to start with some of the user facing kind of output and then go down? So you want to start at the bottom of the iceberg or the little tip on top?
Let's start with the user visual so people can get a sense of what it's doing. And then, let's pop the hood and see, okay, now what's underneath it and what's working to make that happen. I think that would be great.
Okay, right on. So I'll show you who we call Ollie. And so what we realized is because we also are user facing, we interact with the user. It's far easier to connect with one omni-agent or a single agent who wraps all of the different skills models that are driven or guided by the ML layer that John was talking about. Like, how do you capture the nuanced judgment by a rep? And so what I'll show you are some of the interactions of how does Ollie surface what is being driven by the ML layer, drawing on a series of tools, skills, and models. And then he shows up wherever you might be working. So whether that's inside a Claude, in Slack, or wherever it might be. So I'll show you an example first. I'll go into my own Slack. And
Couple questions where you dive into. I just love it. So Ollie, why Ollie? What give us the genesis of why you named Ollie? Like, I'm sure it's an interesting story. So I'd love to understand that a little bit.
I am like slightly embarrassed to tell you how much time I spent thinking about naming. It is like weird picking a face. And basically what we realized is, like, for a rep, you have to trust in a high stakes deal with major calls. And if you are working, especially on a named account basis, like, you got to get to know the person who is surfacing the judgment that oftentimes will run counter to, and Ollie will be pushing a rep to go in the opposite direction of what the conventional wisdom of their playbook says. Because that's his whole point, is he's there to tell a rep when to throw out the existing playbook. And so you're not going to do this with the meeting analyzer, the discovery briefer. And so instead of where most people, they're approaching their architecture from, let's build task-specific agents, and every rep may be interacting with 30, 50, 100 of them in a day. They need one person, one voice that they can trust. And so from a user perspective, that made the most sense. The second was, now it's got to be short, fast, easy to say, remember, and toe the line between fun and easy to talk to, but this dude knows his stuff. And the other debate around this was what we realized, and we did a lot of research into this, 75% of people gender their AI. And that was like a funny thing, is Ollie an it? Is it a she, a he? So often we'll talk about Ollie. He's the agent for enterprise sales.
Love that. And I agree. And I also think it's like this paradigm that's happening too, where it's, you're right, trust, but also looking at AI, starting to look at AI less as software or a tool and more as a teammate. And that's the shift that's happening. And that's where love that you've came to Ollie, and Ollie is really a teammate in this scenario too. How you just described, Ollie's my teammate. He helps me close deals. He helps me do this. He helps me do that. So I love that.
100%.
And Ollie's there to make life easier, not just for the AE or the sales leader, but for RevOps as well. When you look at those systems that have 130 different agents that you're managing that aren't talking and interacting with each other, it's just a harder situation to get into. We have very complex personalities, opinions. So how our architecture is built is around many different sub-agents that all interact and communicate and talk, and then Ollie being the presence, it's the singular presence that you can interact with, just like I have a creative side of my brain to a very analytical side to my brain. So each sub-agent is very high tuned for that kind of emotion or function.
Love it.
Spot on.
All right.
So I'll show you a couple different views of like how you can see Ollie's brain working. I'll start at the kind of individual user level, and then we'll go up and we'll look at the team level overall from there. So let me pull up first. Let's start with a place that most people live in, hang out, is going to be Slack. And so Ollie, whenever he picks up on a new pattern, either in our pipeline or across deals or in a single deal. So here's an example where, so yesterday, Ollie popped up and was like, hey, Nate, the team's got 4 deals that could use your engagement. So here's a couple different things that you need to check out. Hey, Flair's a deal that has been stuck in problem discovery 22 days with no clear exit. Here's what's going on. You should begin to reach out to the CRO. And so I looked at what Ollie had written, forwarded that out. Now that's on an individual user level. So this is DMs with Ollie prepping me for meetings, running me through different things. Now I'll also bring you into an internal channel, Ollie Deal Room, where every morning, and we made this public so that all of our reps and everybody can see as well. And I'm showing you like good, bad, and ugly. It's like, why do we win and why do we lose? And so Ollie is rolling up what's changed to begin to surface that across, again, every deal, every rep that is working inside of the business. So he has a couple different roles, working on a deal level with an individual, working with me as the exec sponsor in our deals, and then overall thinking about pipeline process. So what this looks like now, I'm going to take you into the console so you can see how Ollie works. When he reaches out and says, hey, Nate, Flair is stuck in stage 1, longer than average. Here's what's going on behind the scenes. So this is some example data we sell to restaurant brands. And what Ollie's doing is comparing stuck deals in our pipeline compared to the patterns of others to go figure out what we do. And so let's say we're working on Chipotle or Shake Shack. We can begin to see what has Ollie considered for each of these deals, and then what prompt he wrote for himself, and then surfaced back through, maybe it's email, maybe it's Slack. So for example, I'm going to open up 2 different views. And so let's see what Ollie was working on for Chipotle versus Shake Shack. Now, when you look at what Ollie wrote, so I didn't write this. Ollie wrote the prompt himself to put himself to work based on what he was picking up in Chipotle. And so he's saying, hey, I've got to figure out, I don't really know what's going on with Scott Boatwright and Adam. And I've got to figure out, how do I align all of these different use cases like catering loyalty, international expansion, points management. And so you can take a look at Ollie's brain. He's effectively having conversations with himself to figure out, what do I go surface to the user? Which is very different if you go look at what he wrote for Shake Shack. Completely different, because it's a completely different set of context. However, in both scenarios, he's pulling on what actually works in scenarios like this, which is really important, because if you don't have the architecture that John was talking about, where you're capturing team-wide, how do you actually apply that on a deal-by-deal basis? That's where it begins to get a little tricky. And then finally, as Ollie is working on Shake Shack, Chipotle, figuring out what's happening across each individual, then he's pushing this up for me as the leader to begin to see, what is Ollie doing across our reps, and where is he taking, for example, like Marcus is really good at competitive positioning, driving momentum in deals. He's capturing that from Marcus, and we can go see what exactly is Marcus doing? And then how is he maybe bringing that back to Sarah, who is really struggling in a competitive scenario or environment? And then as a leader, connecting it back to, what does that actually mean translated in terms of ACV, win rate, cycle time? and looking at how that actually, because that's ultimately what we care about, time saving and so on is great and it's nice. But in the revenue game, it's like, hey, got to pay the bills too.
That's right. Because with that time, I could go on TikTok, right, and not do more revenue generating activity. So time is great, but the output of that time and where it's spent is much better. This is awesome. So if I'm connecting dots, so I'm able to engage with Ollie across multiple platforms. So if it's Slack or your own UX UI or other places, so Ollie's kind of living with me along my journey, and then Ollie's surfacing key insights to me, and I'm able to engage. But then Ollie's taking that information of loss patterns or win patterns and then applying those things to existing deals. So it's communicating with itself, trying to figure out what do we, based upon my learning and knowledge of everyone and their successes, because you just showed the different reps and where they're strong and weak, because and so let's be honest, you, me, John, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. Everyone does. No one's perfect. So it's trying to figure out how do we take these strengths from this person and apply it in real time in context of the current scenario of the deal. So that way I can action it based upon all of that context and information that I have right now. Is that kind of connecting all those dots? Does that kind of connect them?
Yep, 100%. So it is a flywheel. It's the beauty of all these kind of ML background of we're seeing how the reps interact with people. We're throwing actual memory, which we could dive into. It's its own independent conversation, as well as the analytics side of things, where we're looking for those patterns, those signals. We're extracting all of that information and feeding that into a pattern recognition. Ultimately, it just continues to spiral. So as each one of those things continue, it actually learns in a deep learning standpoint versus just trying to analyze a single document and move on.
So I'd love to ask you a follow-up question on that. Where you're going to, so if I'm, okay, so I've always, CRMs are like a gold mine of data. Outlook, Teams, all these threads are gold mines of data. Conversational intelligence call recordings, gold mine of data, but they're not very well utilized and they're not very well connected, especially overall. So when you come on board, so talk a little bit about the ML model just for a second. So if you were to come on board, or say I brought you to the company, would you then take all that information and start doing a ML model around this to kind of get us a learning pattern of all the information we already have versus starting from the ground up? Is that kind of how you build it?
Yeah, the primary architecture for us is we put all the data in one place. Getting all of that data aggregated into a single location makes it easier to basically run cross-domain analysis. If I don't have all of my CRM data next to my transcript meeting data and I'm treating them together, it's just harder. Putting something in two different rooms of your house, using them together, it's just harder fundamentally. So the first and foremost should bring that together, and then everything is a point in time. The analogy for why we use point in time data. So if you recall a memory from your childhood and what you're really leaning into there, you have to take into more than what you can do visually. A movie can't represent that. If it's like the first time you rode your bike, you remember if there was a breeze. You remember all these other different variables and things that are happening around you that you can tangibly not replicate elsewhere. And that's what putting everything together really lets us do. Is if I go back in time and say on March 15th, this happened, what was happening in my meetings? What was happening in Slack? What was happening in the market? What was happening there? And snapshotting all of that so that we actually know what happened and can run analysis on that.
That's awesome. And before we get back to the grid you're just pulling up, this question I come across a lot, and so I'd love your opinion on it since you're the first brain on the call, is a bunch of people don't get started because they think they have to have perfect data. And in my opinion, and I would love if you're aligned, great. If not, I would love a debate, is that there is no such thing as perfect data. And that's a myth that doesn't exist. And when you have a bunch of humans entering information across multiple systems and also recording stuff, there's no way to ever that is always going to be imperfect. So the best thing to do is leverage capability to work with the imperfect data and build relationships and things like that. So I'd love your opinion. If someone were to say, our data is terrible, no one has ever done hygiene on us, I can't get started. Like, how would you respond to that? What's your knowledge on that?
I'm going to make some engineers mad and I'm going to make some happy. But data is a product of people. Ultimately, we're creating the data that's getting aggregated, and humans are imperfect by nature. So there is a logical fallacy that you could have perfect data because its originating source is imperfect. So you can have well-structured data, you can have data that's accessible, and that's a kind of a varying Richter scale of, yeah, it's really perfect. We've got it really structured, it's rigid, it's self-protecting. And then you have the other end of the spectrum of people have been throwing stuff over the fence. So there is a Richter scale there, but at the end of the day, if you know what's wrong with your data, it's how you use it. That's what turns it into knowledge. So being able to identify what's wrong, treat that as just the real world use case of what it is, like that's how you get to knowledge, and that's how you get to a proper outcome. So no data is perfect. It's more about how you use that data and how you identify that data than anything else.
So let me take Jonathan's job for a second and ask you a follow-up question, John, because this was an analogy that you gave to me where I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So there's data that drives something like the health or a health score of a deal, but then there's also a confidence level or a confidence interval. So talk about the racehorse analogy of when a certain model gets promoted above others and how you think about making sure that we're accounting for imperfection. Like, how do you think about the confidence level of data?
When we bring on, so we have a baseline judgment layer model that we use. We've trained it. It's a global model. Enterprises are excluded from it. We've trained on this data. We know this is good. It sets the bar. And then we bring on an organization and we start training isolated on their data set to build another model. And it's kind of like a racehorse. So that company gets value from day one because they're using the train model that we have, but it might not be fully in tuned yet to what they've got going on. There are nuances to the business, and every night we're comparing the two based off of valuations to determine which one is giving better outputs. Which one says this deal, it's called nearest neighbor, which one is getting us closer to the right nearest neighbor deals and outcomes. And then at some point, that whole pendulum switches and those enterprises are on there, get switched over to their custom model, and that continues to grow. Even if this grows, you still continue to compare the two. So they're kind of racing all the time against each other.
Kind of depends on how dynamic the data is. A lot more data, you can find patterns more confidently. Little data, outliers and dirty data will skew things. So depending on what would you say, John, is the median time to when their model is trained with enough data to smooth out some of those outliers and you see it begin to switch positions, pole position?
Yeah, it's a nice exponential graph based off of the size of your data set. So if you're a smaller org, you're probably going to rely on our baseline model for a lot longer because we do need a larger data set or threshold to be able to get there. If you're a large enterprise level customer and you come in and you give us quite a bit of data to process and backfill some snapshots on, some basically that time series data, you're going to get there a lot quicker. Data is the name of the game. And whether or not it's back to your original point and how we analyze that, whether or not it's good data, bad data, it doesn't have to be perfect data because there's no such thing.
Yeah. And at this point, I just gave a hosting capability to Nate, and I'll let you two finish the show. So that was good, Nate. I love that.
I'll send the invoice later.
No, and I think that's important because I think there's a meme I always love to reference, which is there's a lot of pressure from boards and CEOs about delivering AI and getting immediate benefits and all these things, right? And the meme is, who are we? It says CEOs. What do we want? It says AI. What do we want it to do? We don't know. When do we want it? Do you want it now? And it's like, but that's what you're up against. But what people have to understand is ChatGPT and Claude and all the frontier models, they keep get better and better because they're training on more and more data. They weren't great overnight. If you looked at, the first iteration of ChatGPT compared to today, you'd be like, I wouldn't even use that thing. But when it came out, you're like, holy crap, this thing is the best thing I've ever seen. And so it takes time. And I think people have to understand what you just mentioned, which is the underlying factor of I've got to have data, I got to train, I got to find these things, and it's an exponential curve. And so why it may start slower it's going to hit a peak of continual acceleration after training and information and stuff like that. And people just have to be a little bit patient with it and understand that's what's going to happen. And so I think that's a very important point you made.
Yeah. And one key point too is if you're not reevaluating the outcomes and getting that true feedback loop that we mentioned earlier, you could be wandering off into the distance and not going north when you should be going south, or not, or going south when you should be going north.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point. And I just saw a glimpse of that thing, the graph you pulled up, and I don't know if it was going there, but that was one of the things under the hood. How does it make sure that it has that kind of recurring learning loop and finding anomalies and taking the good patterns that it's finding and making sure that those are the ones that it's doing? So tell us a little bit about how that works.
So in the AI world, term would be evaluations. Ollie evaluates himself based off of how he's doing in nightly training jobs. So think of it like, when you do your annual review and you're doing a self-evaluation, Ollie's doing that every night to try and figure out where he thinks he's standing. And then I'm a firm believer in human in the loop patterns here. Well, I'm not trying to completely replace the sales rep. Ollie's trying to be your assistant to help you get there. Like a good assistant, it's always interacting and talking. So if something seems off or something isn't right, Ollie is looking at the feedback like a good coworker that it's getting from the human in the interaction, bringing that in, internalizing it, and then putting it back into its nightly training jobs.
So that feedback could be if Ollie sends me an exec to exec forwardable email, if I'm changing the language and I'm making edits, or if he writes up a draft kind of account strategy for an AE and they say, no, Ollie, do it like this. All of that is a signal of, Ollie, there's something there that the human knows that you don't. You should take that into account alongside of your data.
Yeah, that's a section of the business case. The ROI first or various other things. Like it's analyzing what the human has to change to be able to determine it. And it can be as simple as if you tell someone you tell Ollie 3 times in a day to make the email bluff, like it's going to start making all the emails bluff in real time.
Which is amazing. And I love that because there's a lot of tools or things out there where you actually have to like point and train in a separate session versus it's just learning as you go. So the adjustments that you're making to Ollie on the fly, shorten this email, or you didn't include this, or I think we should do this. It's like, it's taking those as part of its learning. As you mentioned, it's ongoing learning evaluation to grow and get better, which is phenomenal because it's no additional work or time other than the time that's already spent. There's no additional training or anything like that. It's happening in real time. So I love that. This has been phenomenal. I would love to end on one last question, and then you all tell us where to find you and all this good stuff. But the final question I'd love to ask is, so you went after this big problem that a lot of go-to-market operators or leaders know existed. You built a great solution. And obviously I can see how it would impact, but can you share any of some of the impacts that it's had on some of your customers anonymously? So what are like the top 2 or 3 things that people are seeing the impact in and what areas of their business?
Yeah. So generally the outcomes follow a maturity curve. So on average, Ollie adds 28K. Now keep in mind, we work in the enterprise context often, but on average, he adds 28K to the ACV over the course of a year to a team. And he trims about 32 days off of the median sales cycle time. And generally what we see is within your first quarter, the deals that you are already going to win, you're going to win with less discounting. Then those deals that you're going to win, you're going to start to compress cycle times. Then you're going to start to see over time, maybe second half of the year, the deals that you were going to lose, you're now winning. And then you'll start to think of it like your classic maturity curve. And so as Ollie figures out deeper and deeper patterns, gets more and more embedded, then you'll start to see that slope. And that's when those things start to stack up in the fourth quarter. You have a bigger ACV with a compressed cycle time, and across the board, you're seeing higher wins. And so that's where it begins to get really fun for Ollie from there.
Love it. So I have a digital teammate who's always learning, who's taking all the patterns of the company and other reps and taking the best practices. And on top of that, I get more revenue per deal in less time. It sounds like a win for everyone. So I love that. So tell us where we can find you all, where are the places to go, where you could LinkedIn, Reddit, where are all the places that people should take a look at Nate and John?
Yeah, LinkedIn for sure, but also our blog, fluint.io/blog. John's been doing more and more technical writing lately. He just put out a guide on building enterprise AI agents this morning, and on Thursday is dropping a GitHub repo with some links to some DIY resources for the crew who are starting to think of, okay, this whole idea of time series data, guiding agents with kind of some learning infrastructure that's kind of interesting. John has been getting more and more into the just external side of the business. We've put him out from behind the computer and out into the world a little more lately. So you'll find John on LinkedIn, but also our blog.
Love it. Love it. Yes. All right. I'm going to check those. I'll make sure to check those repos out, John. See what I can learn. Appreciate you. Appreciate y'all doing that. So guys, thank you so much for coming. Everyone, make sure that you check out Nate and John. Make sure you check out the blogs, the GitHub repos, LinkedIn, etc. Go check out their product. Appreciate you all taking the time. This has been amazing. So thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks so much, John.
Until next time, y'all. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the GTM AI Podcast. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, and come back for more.